TIFU by accidentally ruining my friend's wedding with a speech I wasn't supposed to give. A bit of backstory: I, 30M, have been best friends with Josh, 31M, since college. We met during our freshman year and hit it off instantly. We were inseparable for the first couple of years, and although we had our ups and downs, we'd always had each other's backs. Over the years, we've both gone through some pretty major life changes, breakups, career shifts, personal growth, but we always managed to reconnect and catch up, regardless of how much time had passed. So when Josh got engaged to his longtime girlfriend, Emily, 29F, I was thrilled for him. Emily's great. She's a little reserved but incredibly smart and funny once you get to know her. I was honored when Josh asked me to be his best man. Of course, I accepted, even though I was nervous about the whole wedding thing. I've never been a big fan of public speaking, but I figured I could handle it for my best friend. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of the best man speech. It's a sacred moment during weddings where the best man gets up in front of everyone and shares heartfelt stories, jokes, and good wishes for the happy couple. But here's the thing: Josh and Emily had made it clear from the start that they didn't want any embarrassing speeches or wild, drunken stories about their past. They wanted something heartfelt and meaningful, and I totally respected that. However, this is where things started to go wrong. I don't know if it was the pre-wedding nerves or the fact that I was a little too determined to make my speech stand out, but the day before the wedding, I made a huge mistake. Josh and Emily had a rehearsal dinner the night before, and I was hanging out with a group of their friends and family. It was casual, nothing too formal, and the alcohol was flowing. I was feeling good, chatting with everyone, and having a great time. At some point, the conversation turned to the wedding, and someone jokingly asked me if I had my speech ready. Being a little tipsy, I laughed and said, "Oh, I've got it all planned out, don't worry." Someone else asked if I could give them a preview. I said, "Sure, why not?" and before I knew it, I was standing up in front of a small crowd of about 10 people, delivering my speech like it was the real thing. I started off on the right note, mentioning how much Josh meant to me, how we'd been through thick and thin, and how proud I was of him for finding someone as amazing as Emily. I even threw in a few jokes that seemed to land well with the crowd. But then, I got carried away. Somehow, I started reminiscing about all the crazy times Josh and I had in college. The wild nights out, the stupid pranks we pulled, the times we got into trouble together, typical best friend stuff. As the drinks kept flowing, I began embellishing some of the stories for comedic effect, throwing in a few details that probably shouldn't have been shared in front of Emily's parents or her family. I talked about the time Josh got so drunk at a party that he accidentally sent an explicit message to his mom, thinking it was Emily. I laughed, the crowd laughed, but then I started to see some uncomfortable glances from the people around me. But I kept going. At some point, I launched into a story about how Josh once tried to set up an elaborate prank on his ex-girlfriend, only for it to backfire and end up with him having to apologize profusely while holding a giant teddy bear in the rain. It was hilarious at the time, but in retrospect, it wasn't the kind of thing I should have been telling in front of Emily. By the time I was wrapping up, I noticed that the vibe had completely shifted. The room had gone quiet. Emily's face had gone from lighthearted to stone cold. Her mother was glaring at me, and Josh was awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. The worst part? I realized that I had just told the most embarrassing and inappropriate stories about Josh that were absolutely not meant to be shared in front of Emily's family. In the moment, I thought I could just brush it off, make a joke, and salvage the situation, but the damage had already been done. Emily stood up, excused herself from the table, and walked out of the room without a word. Josh followed her immediately. The rest of the group awkwardly shuffled around, pretending like nothing had happened. I was mortified. I had just ruined the night, and it was only going to get worse tomorrow. After a tense silence, I made my way to Josh and Emily's hotel room, hoping to apologize. Josh was sitting on the bed, his face buried in his hands. Emily was sitting at the desk, arms crossed, not looking at me. "Dude, I'm really sorry," I said, trying to sound genuine. I don't know what happened, I was just trying to be funny. I didn't mean to make things weird. Josh sighed deeply. It's not just the stories, man. It's everything. You know how Emily feels about those old stories. She's not comfortable with that stuff being aired out. It's supposed to be a special day, not a reminder of my ridiculous past. I tried to explain that I didn't mean anything by it, but Emily didn't want to hear it. She was upset, and rightfully so. I could tell she was trying to hold it together, but she was hurt. The rest of the evening was awkward. I left the room feeling like the worst friend in the world. I texted Josh that I was truly sorry and would do whatever I could to make it up to him. The next day, I showed up to the wedding early, hoping I could smooth things over before the ceremony. But the damage was done. Emily wasn't speaking to me. Josh was distant. And when the time came for my best man speech, I barely got a chance to say anything before I completely blanked. Instead of the heartfelt message I had planned, I stammered through a few awkward sentences, apologized again, and sat back down. Needless to say, the wedding wasn't what I had hoped for. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the joyous occasion it should have been. I learned a valuable lesson that day: alcohol and public speaking are a dangerous combination. But more importantly, I learned that some stories are best left untold, especially on someone else's wedding day. I'm still trying to repair my friendship with Josh and Emily, but I'm not sure things will ever be the same. So, yeah. That's how I accidentally ruined my best friend's wedding with a speech I wasn't supposed to give. Don't be like me. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by accidentally starting a fire in my neighbor's house, while trying to be a hero. So, this all started about a week ago when I decided to be the good neighbor and offer to help my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, with some minor tasks around her house. I'm 28, I live alone, and I've been trying to be more social and involved in my neighborhood since I moved in a couple of months ago. Mrs. Jenkins is this sweet, frail lady in her late 70s who lives alone 2 doors down. She's always friendly when we cross paths, so I thought it would be nice to offer a helping hand. One morning, she called me, asking if I could stop by because her kitchen light had stopped working, and she didn't feel comfortable dealing with electrical stuff. I'm not an electrician by any means, but I know enough to change a light bulb or deal with a basic fuse. So, I told her I'd swing by after work to take a look. I got to her place that afternoon, and she welcomed me in with her usual warm smile. She seemed a bit flustered though, and led me straight to the kitchen. The problem wasn't just the light bulb, apparently, there was something weird going on with the electrical wiring, and she hadn't been able to get the light to turn on for days. I told her I'd give it a go and started by checking the light switch. After some poking around, I figured it was likely just a tripped fuse. Now, I'm not a complete idiot, so I turned off the main power supply in the house before touching anything further. I knew better than to mess with live wires. Mrs. Jenkins seemed relieved that I knew what I was doing. I grabbed a step stool to reach the fuse box, and she went off to sit in the living room. At this point, I was feeling pretty good about myself, helping out a neighbor, maybe even saving her a couple of $100 on a professional repairman. Here's where things went horribly wrong. While I was fiddling with the fuse box, I noticed something odd. There was this weird, faint smell in the air. I couldn't quite place it, but it smelled like something burning, just a little. I figured it was probably from dust or maybe a burnt-out fuse, but I didn't think much of it. I kept working on getting the light fixed, but the smell grew stronger. At this point, I got a little concerned and decided to check if there were any other electrical problems in the house. I walked into the living room to tell Mrs. Jenkins about the smell and ask if she had noticed it too. When I stepped into the living room, she was sitting in her armchair, staring at the TV, looking totally unbothered. But as soon as I crossed the threshold, I saw it. There was smoke coming from the corner of the room. Thick, gray smoke. My heart skipped a beat. It looked like it was coming from behind a bookshelf near the fireplace, and it didn't take long for me to realize that the smoke wasn't coming from the fireplace. There was something on fire, right in her living room. Panic set in. My first instinct was to shout for Mrs. Jenkins to get out of the house. I rushed to her and told her to leave immediately, but she was so confused. She didn't even seem to realize what was happening. I pushed her out the front door, telling her to wait for me there, and ran back inside to deal with the fire. The smoke was getting thicker by the second. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find to help, which happened to be a dish towel from the kitchen. I'm not sure what I was thinking, maybe I could smother the flames or something, but I sprinted back toward the fire. The flames were small, but they were definitely real. They had started in the corner, where there was a little pile of old magazines that Mrs. Jenkins had kept stacked for years. I'm not sure how it started, but the fire must have been smoldering for a while, and now it was spreading rapidly. I threw the towel at the fire, but of course, that did absolutely nothing except make the situation worse. The towel caught fire immediately, and I dropped it, cursing myself for being an idiot. The whole time, I kept hearing Mrs. Jenkins yelling from the front yard, asking what was going on. I ran to the kitchen to grab some water, probably the dumbest thing I could have done, considering it was an electrical fire. But at the time, I was panicking. I threw a large pot of water at the flames, and instantly there was a loud pop, followed by a huge flash of light. That was when I heard the loudest sound of my life, the fire alarm going off. Mrs. Jenkins must have triggered it when she opened the front door, and it echoed through the house like a freight train. I had no idea what to do. I ran back into the living room, trying to stop the fire from spreading, but it was too late. The flames had reached the curtains, and now everything was starting to go up in smoke. At that point, I knew I had to get out. I grabbed Mrs. Jenkins by the arm, and we ran out the door just as the fire spread into the hallway. I could feel the heat even from outside. I dialed 911 and, shaking, told them there was a fire at Mrs. Jenkins' house. I couldn't believe what I had done. The fire department showed up in about 10 minutes, and by then, the flames were out of control. They quickly evacuated the house and started dousing the fire. Fortunately, the firefighters managed to contain the damage, but the house wasn't in great shape. The fire had destroyed the living room, and there was heavy smoke damage to the entire downstairs area. Mrs. Jenkins was heartbroken. Her entire living room had gone up in smoke, and she had no idea how it started. The worst part? She blamed herself for asking me to help her. She kept apologizing for putting me in a bad position and said she should have just called a professional in the first place. Of course, I told her it wasn't her fault, but she was inconsolable. As for me, I felt absolutely terrible. I had tried to be the good guy, offering to help out a neighbor, but I ended up nearly burning down her house. The guilt was eating me alive. The insurance is covering some of the damages, but they can't replace the sentimental value of things that were lost. Mrs. Jenkins had some old family photos and heirlooms in that room, and I knew they were irreplaceable. Now I'm left with a pile of embarrassment, a massive amount of guilt, and a house that smells like smoke. I haven't been able to face Mrs. Jenkins since the fire. I'm planning on helping her get the place cleaned up, but I'm not sure how to even begin to repair the trust one shattered in a single afternoon. In conclusion, I learned a very valuable lesson. If you're going to try to help someone with electrical work, maybe don't use a dish towel, water, and panic as your primary firefighting strategy. And for the love of God, if you see smoke, just call the fire department first. Don't try to play hero. I've learned the hard way. TIFU by accidentally insulting my girlfriend's family and almost ruining Christmas. So, I'm a guy in my late 20s, and for the past few months, I've been dating this amazing girl, Emma. We met through some mutual friends, and it's been really great. She's kind, funny, and pretty much everything I could ask for. I'm also really into the whole family thing. I've always had a good relationship with my own family, and I figured meeting her family for Christmas would be a good way to show that I'm serious about her. Now, here's where I messed up. Emma invited me to her family's Christmas gathering, which was being held at her parents' house. I was excited about it. I had heard about her parents a couple of times and they seemed like lovely people. Her dad is a doctor, her mom is a teacher, and they live in a beautiful house in the suburbs. I figured it would be a pretty standard Christmas celebration: food, presents, maybe some awkward small talk, but nothing I couldn't handle. Boy, was I wrong. First, let me set the scene. I arrived at their house and immediately felt out of my depth. The place was huge, like, huge. When Emma opened the door and I stepped in, the first thing that hit me was the smell of freshly baked cookies. The second thing was the complete opulence of the place. The house looked like it was straight out of a holiday movie. There was a giant Christmas tree, sparkling with thousands of lights, and ornaments everywhere. In the living room, a grand piano sat in the corner, with a beautifully dressed table in the center. The entire setup screamed wealth in a way that made me nervous. Emma introduced me to her family, and everything seemed fine at first. Her parents were warm and welcoming, but I could tell they were a little refined. You know, the kind of people who say things like, "Oh, you must try the smoked salmon," and they look at you like you're supposed to know what that is. I'm a pretty casual guy. Jeans and a t-shirt are my go-to, but Emma told me her family was a bit more, well, put together, so I had put on my best I'm trying outfit. Still, I felt underdressed. The night started with dinner. There were so many forks and spoons at the table that I didn't know where to begin. I tried to just follow Emma's lead, hoping I wouldn't make some dumb mistake like using the wrong fork for the salad or drinking someone's wine by accident. But, as soon as the food started being served, I could tell things were getting awkward. Emma's dad, Dr. Harrison, was talking about some new experimental procedure he was working on with some patients. I tried to keep up, but I'm not exactly the medical type. So, I nodded and smiled, hoping to contribute somehow. But then, things took a turn when Emma's aunt, Catherine, who had a PhD in history, or something like that, started talking about her latest research trip to Europe. She was saying something about visiting the ruins of an ancient castle and how the local dialect was different from what they had expected. She got super detailed, and I zoned out for a second. My mind wandered and before I knew it, I had blurted out, "Why would you go there? I mean, isn't the whole ruin part the point of the place? Seems like a waste of time." Now, I thought it was a harmless comment. I honestly didn't think it would come off as rude. But immediately, I could tell I'd struck a nerve. The room went quiet, and even Emma shot me a look that could have cut glass. Catherine stared at me for a moment, and then, in the calmest voice possible, she said, "Well, sometimes it's important to learn about the past, even if it's in a decayed state." The silence that followed was thick. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I tried to backpedal, saying something like, "Oh, no, I didn't mean it that way. I just meant that, the ruins are ruins because they're old, so it seems historical." My attempt to salvage the conversation only seemed to make it worse. Dr. Harrison, trying to break the tension, cleared his throat and said, "Well, it's certainly an interesting way to look at it." But his tone was weirdly stiff. At this point, I was sweating bullets. Emma quickly chimed in, giving me that forced smile I've learned to recognize over the past couple of months. "Honey, why don't you help me in the kitchen? We need to set up dessert." I followed her, hoping the next few minutes would somehow make up for my colossal blunder. In the kitchen, Emma was visibly upset. She didn't yell at me, but she was clearly frustrated. She muttered something under her breath like, "Why do you have to be so awkward?" And I didn't know what to say. I knew I'd messed up, but I didn't realize how badly until after dinner. We got through the rest of the meal in relative silence. I tried to help, but every attempt at a conversation felt like it was just digging the hole deeper. I didn't know what to do. I tried to apologize to her aunt, but Catherine just gave me a tight smile and said, "I'm sure you didn't mean to offend me." I'm not sure if she was being genuine or sarcastic, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. After dinner, we moved into the living room to exchange gifts. I was already dreading the moment when I had to open the present from Emma's parents. I didn't know if it was going to be a high-end bottle of wine or a book on advanced medical procedures or something equally out of my depth. But when I opened it, I was surprised. It was a really nice leather wallet. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not, but I took it in stride and said, "Thank you so much. This is amazing." They smiled, but the tension was still there. Finally, we all gathered around the tree and started chatting. Things had calmed down a little, but the awkwardness still hung in the air. Emma's parents had given me a fair shot at redeeming myself, but I could tell I'd made a bad first impression. It wasn't just one comment, it was the whole evening. The wrong joke, the accidental rudeness, and the overwhelming feeling that I was way out of my league. We left not long after that. Emma was a bit more quiet than usual on the drive home. I felt awful. I had ruined Christmas, and I knew I had a lot of making up to do. When we got to her place, I apologized for the millionth time, and she sighed, shaking her head. "It's okay, but maybe don't make fun of my family's interests next time?" I promised I wouldn't, but I wasn't sure if that would be enough. So yeah, TIFU by being a complete idiot at my girlfriend's family Christmas dinner. It wasn't a huge disaster, but it was definitely one of the most awkward nights of my life. Hopefully, I can smooth things over, but for now, I'm just trying to make sure I don't make things any worse. TIFU by turning my backyard into a battleground because of a forgotten Bluetooth speaker. This happened last summer, and I'm only now emotionally recovered enough to talk about it. I'm a 34-year-old dad in suburban New Jersey with 2 kids, a dog, and, until very recently, a reputation as the most laid-back guy on the block. Not anymore. Now I'm the lunatic with a war bunker in my backyard. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, it all started on a sunny Saturday afternoon. My wife took the kids to visit her sister for the weekend, leaving me with an empty house, a fridge full of beer, and exactly one plan, a peaceful afternoon of grilling, lawn work, and loud music. I dragged our Bluetooth speaker, this rugged, waterproof, military-grade thing I bought on a late-night Amazon bender, into the backyard. I connected it to my phone and blasted a carefully curated playlist of early 2000s rock and late 90s hip-hop. Think Linkin Park meets Missy Elliott. I got into the zone, trimmed hedges, mowed the lawn, grilled a few burgers, had a couple of beers. At some point, a neighbor popped his head over the fence, gave me a thumbs up and said something like, "Nice vibe, man." That's probably the last positive interaction I had with any of them. Around 9 p.m., I went inside to clean up. Here's the critical error. I forgot the Bluetooth speaker was still out in the yard, still connected to my phone. Still powered on. Now, I'm a night owl. I stayed up until 1 a.m. binge-watching a documentary about competitive duck herding, it's a thing, and then I crashed. Hard. Phone by my side. Volume all the way up. At 3:17 a.m., my alarm went off. A custom ringtone. Not a normal beeper chime, oh no. I'd set it to the beginning of DMX's Party Up because I thought it was funny. You know, the one that starts with him shouting "Y'all gon' make me lose my mind." Only instead of it going off quietly next to my bed, it blasted at full volume from the Bluetooth speaker still sitting in my backyard. So imagine this, in the dead of night, total silence in the neighborhood, and suddenly, from a suburban backyard, DMX starts screaming at maximum volume like he's summoning the dead. I shot up in bed, confused and disoriented, thinking I was being attacked. I knocked over a lamp. The dog lost his mind and started barking like we were under siege. I stumbled to the window and realized the sound wasn't coming from inside the house, it was outside. That's when I remembered the speaker. I ran out into the yard in boxers and a sleep shirt, phone in hand, trying to pause the music, but the screen was unresponsive. The cold sweat from panic mixed with the real sweat from running outside in July humidity. I fumbled with the controls, but Bluetooth lag kept it going. DMX was now yelling, "Get it on the floor, get it on the floor," like it was a military command. Lights started flicking on across the neighborhood. I saw blinds parting, phones lighting up in windows. And then, to my horror, floodlights snapped on in my neighbor Greg's yard. Greg is retired military and takes peace and quiet very seriously. Greg storms out in a bathrobe, holding what I assume was a flashlight, but in the moment, it looked suspiciously like a tactical baton. "Who the hell is blasting music?" he bellowed. "Sorry. It's me. I'm turning it off. It's the Bluetooth," I shouted, jabbing at my phone like I was defusing a bomb. But Bluetooth had other plans. The signal dropped and reconnected. Now it wasn't just DMX, it shuffled to Limp Bizkit's Break Stuff. The opening riff hit like an air raid siren. At this point, Greg is shouting. My other neighbor, a yoga instructor named Rachel, comes out in a kimono yelling something about sound pollution and chakra violation. Her husband, Steve, follows, brandishing a pool skimmer like a weapon. Another neighbor starts recording on their phone. I finally managed to yank the speaker cord from its port and the music died. Silence fell, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence where you can hear people's blood pressure rising. Greg pointed at me like I'd committed a war crime. "You woke up my wife, my dogs, and triggered my home security alert. What in God's name were you doing?" I tried to explain, but it came out as a sweaty, stammering mess. It was just, I was cleaning, and then the phone, the speaker, had DMX. Rachel started chanting softly under her breath. I think it was Sanskrit for "never speak to me again." Steve just shook his head and walked back inside, muttering, "Unbelievable." The next morning, I tried to apologize. I brought muffins to Greg's house. He opened the door, looked at them, looked at me, and said, "Noise-canceling headphones, $49.99. Get some." Then he shut the door. Since then, my backyard has been treated like a radioactive zone. Neighborhood kids stopped cutting through it to get to the park. Rachel filed a formal complaint with the HOA, and I got a strongly worded letter titled "Inappropriate Decibel Levels and Disruption of Community Harmony." It used the phrase "egregious nocturnal disturbances" twice. The Bluetooth speaker? It now lives in the garage, unplugged, ashamed, covered in a towel like a shunned parrot. I still flinch when I hear DMX. And the worst part? My wife came home, heard the whole story, and laughed for 10 straight minutes before saying, "Well, at least you finally met the neighbors." Moral of the story: always turn off your Bluetooth speaker. Or risk starting a suburban war. TIFU by accidentally getting high at my girlfriend's parents' house and thinking their cat was my therapist. It all started last weekend when my girlfriend, Sarah, invited me to her parents' house for the first time. We've been dating for 8 months, and she's hinted a few times that her parents are a little old-fashioned, which, in my experience, usually means I need to put on a button-up shirt and not talk about how I once cried during a Subaru commercial. I agreed to the visit because I genuinely like Sarah, and I want to make a good impression. Her parents live in this quiet suburb, in a colonial-style house that smells like furniture polish and mysterious baked goods. Her dad is one of those guys who wears polos tucked into jeans even when he's just watching TV. Her mom has that hyper-sweet, Midwestern "don't you dare curse in my house" kind of vibe. Anyway, after dinner, which was some aggressively seasoned meatloaf and what I swear was pineapple coleslaw, Sarah and I went out to the back porch while her parents cleaned up. She pulled out a little vape pen from her purse, the discreet kind you wouldn't think twice about. She said it was just CBD with a tiny amount of THC, nothing major, just to help her unwind. I hesitated because I don't really mess with that stuff, but I figured one small puff wouldn't hurt. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Oh, my sweet, naive brain. I took one hit. It tasted like citrus and regret. I coughed a little, but it didn't seem like a big deal. Then we went back inside, and things started to shift. At first it was subtle. Her mom's wallpaper looked brighter, like someone cranked the saturation on the whole house. Her dad's voice sounded like it had reverb. And the floor? I could feel the floor like it was gently breathing. I tried to act cool, but Sarah gave me a sideways glance and said, "Are you okay?" That's when I realized I was absolutely, unequivocally not okay. We were sitting in the living room with her parents, and I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. I was trying to focus on the conversation, which, unfortunately for me, had turned to politics. Her dad started ranting about property taxes and how the damn city council is a scam, and I just nodded like a bobblehead on meth. Sarah could tell something was up. She squeezed my hand, probably thinking I was nervous. "No, Sarah." I was currently trying to remember how to blink like a human being. Then the cat walked in. This large, fluffy, judgmental-looking Maine Coon named Buttercup just strutted into the room like she paid the mortgage. I locked eyes with her, and something in my brain short-circuited. I became convinced that Buttercup was there to help me. Like, genuinely thought she was a licensed therapist. She jumped onto the arm of the couch, right next to me. I turned to her, and out loud, I whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." Sarah's mom paused mid-sentence. Her dad stared at me like I'd just farted in Morse code. Sarah went pale. I panicked and tried to play it off by petting the cat like nothing happened. But I guess I was petting too aggressively, because Buttercup hissed, jumped off the couch, and knocked over a decorative ceramic goose that exploded into shards. Her mom shrieked. Her dad stood up like he was about to call the FBI. And I, in my THC-induced panic, decided the best course of action was to stand up and say, "I think I'm having a small to medium spiritual emergency. I'm just going to lie down somewhere and rethink my choices." I walked straight into the coat closet. From inside, I could hear Sarah's mom whispering, "Is he okay?" and her dad muttering something about liberals and drugs. I could hear Sarah apologizing. I was just sitting there in the dark, surrounded by winter coats that smelled like dryer sheets and passive aggression, trying to remember if I had a job. Eventually, Sarah opened the door, pulled me out, and led me upstairs to the guest bedroom, where I laid down and stared at the ceiling fan like it was trying to tell me a secret. She sat next to me, alternating between stifling laughter and low-key panic. I remember grabbing her hand and whispering, "Your cat knows too much." She laughed so hard she nearly fell off the bed. An hour later, I was finally back to semi-functioning human mode, and Sarah said we should just tell her parents I wasn't feeling well and had a migraine. I agreed, mostly because I didn't want to tell her dad that his cat had just done a full Freudian analysis on me in my mind palace. The next morning at breakfast, I came downstairs fully expecting icy stares and judgment. Instead, her mom had made pancakes and said, "Hope you're feeling better, sweetie. Those migraines can be brutal." Her dad gave me a nod, but still looked at me like I might steal a lawnmower. "And Buttercup?" She jumped back on the arm of the couch, stared at me with those enormous green eyes, and I swear on my life, she winked at me. I nodded solemnly. We had shared something, her and I. A silent agreement. A therapeutic session that transcended species. Later that day, when we were driving home, Sarah finally asked, "What exactly happened to you last night?" So I told her. She laughed so hard she had to pull over on the highway. And that's the story of how I traumatized my girlfriend's parents, got therapy from a cat, and destroyed a decorative goose. All because I wanted to be chill. TIFU by accidentally getting adopted by a family in Portugal and ghosting my real job. So this happened last summer, but it still haunts me every time I get an email from HR or hear the word visa. I, 27M, work for a mid-sized software company based in Chicago. It's one of those places that's way too proud of being remote first and encourages employees to work from anywhere in the world. I decided to take them up on this. My original plan was simple: spend a month in Portugal. I'd work during the day and explore the coast in the evenings. I even made a whole spreadsheet. Flights, Airbnbs, time zones, even restaurants with decent Wi-Fi. What could go wrong? I arrived in Lisbon, jet-lagged and disoriented but excited. My Airbnb host, Isabel, was this warm middle-aged woman who looked like someone's favorite aunt. She insisted on picking me up from the airport despite my protests. I figured, okay, that's sweet. That's how people roll here. The apartment was great, smalty, cozy. The Wi-Fi speed test even made me tear up a little. She had cooked bacalhau à brás for me, poured wine, and chatted like we were old friends. The thing is, I speak just enough Portuguese to be dangerous. I could order coffee, make small talk, and understand when someone was yelling at me. But Isabel spoke fast and used a lot of idioms. I nodded a lot and smiled. After the first dinner, she gave me a set of keys, and also a mailbox key, and a supermarket loyalty card. I thought, wow, 5 stars for hospitality. I had no idea. Week 1 goes by. I'm working US hours, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. local, sleeping in, and spending mornings at the beach. Isabel kept inviting me to family dinners and just one more glass of wine. Her cousin brought over fresh fish one night. Her niece wanted help with an English project. I figured she was just being kind to the tourist renting her back room. Then came week 2. I started noticing that nobody else was staying at the house. The Airbnb listing quietly disappeared. The doorbell rang one afternoon and a man in a uniform handed me a piece of mail with my name on it. A utility bill. My name on it. I went to confront Isabel and she just beamed at me and said something like, "You are part of the family now." I thought it was a metaphor. I was wrong. Turns out, Isabel had been telling everyone that I was her long-lost godson from the US. Apparently, my broken Portuguese and awkward manners made it super believable. She had actually updated the address on a few forms I'd left out, a job HR form and a mobile plan receipt, to help me, not realizing they'd use her address. Now mail was showing up in my name at her house. I guess it's kind of a reverse identity theft. I didn't want to be rude, so I went along with it while I tried to straighten things out. But my days started filling with more and more family responsibilities. A nephew's graduation. A christening. Grocery trips. Helping someone set up a PayPal account. I was roped into planning a barbecue. And the weird part? I was loving it. It felt like being in a rom-com. For 2 weeks, I leaned all the way in. I stopped working. Fully stopped. I'd log into Slack, drop a couple of emojis, and then close my laptop. Now, my real job back home was fairly hands-off, so nobody noticed right away. But around week 4, I got a Slack DM from my manager, "Hey, can you hop on for a sec? We've noticed a drop in activity and just want to check in." I panicked. I was sitting in the back of a church, holding a baby, wearing a shirt that said Tio Favorito, favorite uncle. I left the service, ran to a cafe, and got on the call. My manager, bless her soul, was trying so hard to be understanding. "Is everything okay? You're not in the States, are you?" Me, sweating, surrounded by old men shouting about soccer. No, I'm working, I've just got a situation." I told her I'd explain in an email. I didn't. The next day I woke up with 43 unread Slack messages, 3 missed calls from HR, and a calendar invite titled Urgent Review. Turns out, my absence hadn't gone unnoticed after all. An internal tool had flagged my inactivity, and when they tried to mail me some legal docs for a contract renewal, it got forwarded to Isabel's house, where her cousin opened it and responded via WhatsApp in Portuguese. The HR email chain is still the most cursed thing I've ever seen. A woman named Karen, of course, wrote, "Dear Mr. Lewis, while we appreciate cultural exploration, impersonating a family member in a foreign country while on company payroll is a violation of multiple clauses in our employee conduct policy." I wasn't impersonating anyone. But try explaining that you accidentally got semi-adopted in a foreign country while forgetting to tell your employer that you've relocated. My manager was understanding-ish. HR was not. They gave me a choice: resign voluntarily, or face an investigation that could impact future employment records. I picked the former, then cried into a very fluffy pastry while Isabel rubbed my back and said, "You're still family." I ended up staying another month. I helped renovate a shed. I learned how to make fig jam. I taught her niece how to say YOLO in 5 different tones. Eventually, I came back to the States and picked up some freelance work. I still Zoom into Sunday dinners with Isabel's family. They ask about my love life and tell me I should move back for good. Sometimes I think I might. But for now, I just don't answer calls from unknown HR numbers. This happened about 2 months ago, but the fallout is still very much happening. I, 28M, work in a mid-sized marketing firm where I handle accounts and help manage client relationships. I'm not a superstar or anything, just good at my job, friendly, and apparently, this is relevant, considered approachable in the office. That quality turned out to be a double-edged sword. My boss, who we'll call Linda, 42F, is this very charismatic, fast-talking, high-energy executive type. She's been married for 10 years to some finance guy I've never met. She also has 2 kids and constantly brags about how she juggles being a mom and a leader. Cool. She also flirts a lot. With everyone. Men, women, probably inanimate objects too. But it always seemed harmless. Until it wasn't. So one afternoon, I was in her office going over some client presentation materials. It was normal stuff, except she kept getting distracted by texts on her phone. She was clearly annoyed, and I casually joked, "Tell them you're in a super important meeting with a genius strategist." She smirked and said, "You know what, I just might." Then she laughed, typed something, and went back to the meeting. Whatever, right? Next day, her husband shows up. First time anyone's seen him at the office. He's this tall, suit-wearing, Wall Street-looking guy. Linda introduces him to everyone, including me, and there's this weird pause when she says, "And this is Josh, he's one of our best account leads." We spend a lot of time together. He just looks at me and gives this tight-lipped smile that screams, "I know who you are." I awkwardly nod, thinking maybe she's hyped me up or whatever. Anyway, I start noticing Linda getting weird over the next few days. She starts calling me into her office for stuff she could have emailed me. Then one afternoon she says something like, "Hey, I need a huge favor. My husband has been insanely jealous lately. I told him I've been seeing someone, casually, and it's no big deal. I used your name. He thinks we're, involved. Can you just play along if it ever comes up?" Now I'm sitting there trying to figure out if I'm being punked. I laugh, thinking she's joking. She isn't. She's dead serious. Me, Linda, that's kind of insane. Why would you do that? Her, look, it's not a big deal. He just needs to think I have some independence. He's the jealous type and it keeps him in line. You're safe, single, and totally non-threatening. I tell her I'm really not comfortable with this, and she drops it. Or so I thought. A week later, HR calls me in. I'm thinking I'm getting fired. Instead, they ask me if I'm aware of any extracurricular relationship with Linda. I panic. I tell them no, explain the situation in vague terms, and say she might have joked about it but there's nothing going on. Turns out, her husband hired a PI. The dude followed me home. Took pictures of us leaving the building together, one time catching a ride in her car. Another time, we had drinks with a client, and the photos made it look like we were on a date. Her husband confronted her with the evidence. She doubled down and told him yes, she was seeing me, and she was doing it to punish him for his past indiscretions. Suddenly, I'm in the middle of a toxic marriage war I didn't ask to be a part of. Next thing I know, Linda's husband files for divorce. She's freaking out, but still telling people in the office, Josh is such a good friend, he's been so supportive. I try to keep my distance, but rumors are spreading. People start asking me if we're together. I get weird looks in the break room. But it gets worse. Apparently, Linda's husband sent the PI photos to MY apartment building. The doorman. The super, even the old lady who lives next to me and always asks if I'm seeing anyone. One of them forwarded it to my ex-girlfriend, who I broke up with 6 months ago. She texts me, "Nice to know you moved on with your boss." Very classy. Now I'm getting blown up with texts from friends, coworkers, and even my mom, who somehow hears about it through a friend of a friend whose niece works in my building. So I do what any rational person would do. I confront Linda. She says she's sorry, but she panicked and couldn't take it back without looking like a liar. I tell her I need space and that I'm not comfortable working directly with her anymore. A week later, I'm transferred to a different department. No promotion, no explanation, just shuffled off like bad PR. I talk to HR again, but they're basically like, well, there's no formal complaint, and you're still employed, so, I'm stewing in anger and embarrassment, but I'm trying to salvage my reputation. That's when I meet Hannah. Hannah's new to the company, from another branch. Funny, super smart, and she doesn't know about the Linda situation. We start hitting it off. I think maybe this is my chance to reset. Guess who finds out we've been hanging out? Linda. Guess who corners me in the parking garage and says, "Just so you know, if you start dating someone at work right now, it'll really hurt the narrative I've built." I tell her the narrative is a steaming pile of horsecrap and she needs to clean up her own mess. She says, "Well, I could tell HR that you pressured me into the whole thing." That's when I realize, I've got no way to prove anything. It's all hearsay. I was never formally harassed or threatened in writing. And I'm the fake affair guy now. So I lawyer up. I document everything. Every interaction, every message, every favor she asked for. I prepare to go nuclear. Then, like some divine gift, Linda gets caught sexting a real coworker, an intern. HR gets involved. She's put on administrative leave. Suddenly people start apologizing to me. The head of HR pulls me aside and says, "We're really sorry you were caught in all this. We had no idea the extent of her behavior." No kidding. So here I am. 2 months later. Linda's getting divorced, potentially fired, and possibly sued by the intern's parents. He's 19, barely legal, and very pissed. I've been unofficially cleared, but the whispers haven't stopped. My professional reputation took a hit I didn't deserve. I still walk into rooms and feel eyes on me. And Hannah? She doesn't return my texts anymore. I didn't have an affair. I didn't lie, cheat, or manipulate anyone. I just tried to be nice to my boss. TIFU by being the safest option in a nuclear marriage meltdown. TIFU by accidentally kidnapping my neighbor's elderly grandmother and causing an international incident at IKEA. So this happened a few weeks ago, but I'm only now just getting over the full-body cringe enough to share. For context, I, 32M, live in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood. Lots of dog walkers, lots of HOA drama, and lots of retirees. One of my neighbors, Carl, not his real name, lives 2 doors down and is a quiet guy, mid-30s like me, who works from home. We've chatted maybe 4 times total, always friendly, and that's been the extent of our relationship. A few months back, Carl's elderly grandmother, Baba, moved in with him from Poland after her husband passed. She's like 4 feet 9 inches, speaks almost no English, and is the kind of tiny old lady you want to wrap in a blanket and feed soup to. Carl mentioned her once at a block barbecue and said she gets confused sometimes, especially in new places. So one Saturday morning, I'm about to head to IKEA for a solo mission of bad decisions, meatballs, and self-assembly rage. As I'm backing out of my driveway, I notice Baba shuffling down the sidewalk looking kind of lost. She's wearing a heavy coat despite it being 70 degrees Fahrenheit, holding a canvas grocery bag and looking around like she's forgotten where she is. I stop, roll down my window, and say, "Hi Baba. Are you okay?" I only know her name because Carl had yelled it across the street once when she wandered too far into someone's backyard. She looks at me, squints, then walks right up to the passenger door and says something in Polish that I don't understand at all, but she's gesturing at my car and pointing down the road. Now here's the point where I should have said, "Let me call Carl," or even just walked her back. But instead, I think, *O, she probably needs to go to the store. I'm going to IKEA anyway, and that plaza has a Polish deli. I'll just give her a ride and let Carl know later *, so I open the door and help her in. She smiles, pats my arm, and we head off. At this point, I'm feeling pretty good. Helping a sweet old lady? Good karma, right? Wrong. So very, very wrong. I get to IKEA and figure she'll be okay tagging along while I grab a few things. Baba clutches her bag, still smiling, and follows me in. First 20 minutes go fine. She points at a lamp and says something like "Ladny," which I later learned means pretty, and I nod and smile and say, "Yes, very pretty." Then I lose her. I turn around in the lighting section and she's just gone. I immediately start scanning, walking briskly through kitchen setups and office chairs, trying to spot this tiny grandma among the sea of Swedish furniture and overwhelmed couples. I finally find her near the cafeteria, absolutely screaming at a teenage employee who looks like he just started puberty. She's red in the face, waving her bag in the air, yelling in Polish while the poor kid tries to radio someone for help. I rush over, trying to de-escalate, and she turns on me with the fury of 1,000 Slavic ancestors. She starts yelling at me now, poking my chest, clearly saying my name, or some horrifying approximation of it, and then the employee asks if she's with me. I say, yes, I'm her neighbor. Big mistake. Within minutes, a manager shows up. Then mall security. They try asking Baba questions, but she just keeps pointing at me and getting louder. One of the security guys calls someone who speaks Polish. Eventually, they put Baba on the phone with them and she breaks down crying. I'm horrified. I have no idea what she's saying, but everyone is staring at me like I'm a monster. I hear the translator say something to security and then they ask me to come with them to the office. Turns out, Baba thought I abducted her. She thought I was taking her to get murdered in a warehouse, which, okay, IKEA does kind of look like that, and when she couldn't find the exit or figure out what was going on, she panicked. Meanwhile, they called the actual police, and I had to explain everything while Baba cried and I felt like I was shrinking into the world's smallest meatball. I called Carl, who showed up 20 minutes later, out of breath and looking absolutely murderous. After some intense, rapid-fire Polish between him and Baba, he turns to the cops and confirms that, yes, I am a neighbor, and no, I'm not a kidnapper. Baba, now crying for different reasons, starts apologizing to me, patting my face and saying what I assume were words of regret. Carl drives her home while I sit in the back of a cop car going over my statement for the third time. Eventually, they let me go with a strong recommendation to not offer rides to elderly non-English speakers without permission. Later that day, Carl knocks on my door with a six-pack and a very awkward thank you. He explains that Baba has mild dementia, worsened by stress and unfamiliar environments. She thought I was someone she recognized from a TV crime show she watches obsessively, and her brain kind of filled in the rest. The kicker? She now thinks I'm a hero. In her mind, I rescued her from the Swedish kidnappers, IKEA employees, and bravely got her home. She insists I come over for dinner every Sunday. Last week, she tried to set me up with her niece via Zoom. So yeah. TIFU by trying to be a good neighbor, losing a Polish grandma, getting accused of international abduction in IKEA, and somehow becoming a Slavic folk legend in the process. Also, I never got the damn lamp. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by accidentally joining a cult while trying to impress my Tinder date. So this happened last year, but I only recently felt emotionally recovered enough to talk about it. At the time, I was 27, single, and had been swiping on Tinder with a vengeance after a particularly rough breakup. You know the vibe, aggressively pretending to be okay while spiraling into emotional chaos. Anyway, I matched with this woman named Harper. She was stunning, with that effortless boho chic look that screams I drink oat milk and know my birth chart. She also had the kind of bio that sounded vaguely spiritual, seeking alignment, not perfection. Vibes over everything. Let's elevate. Normally, that would be a left swipe. I'm a dude who thinks meditation is just closing your eyes until the anxiety screams louder. But her pictures were cute and I was in the phase of saying yes to chaos. So we matched, chatted, and surprisingly, really hit it off. She was funny, smart, and kind of intoxicating in a I might ruin your life but in an aesthetically pleasing way kind of way. After a few days of chatting, she invited me to a community event her friends were hosting. Her exact words were, "It's a gathering of open hearts, a place to breathe and release. You'll love it." I assumed this meant yoga, maybe a drum circle. Worst case, a bunch of vegan snacks and forced eye contact. I said yes. Not because I wanted to go, but because she ended the invite with, "After, we could go back to my place and keep the energy flowing," winky face, and I am nothing if not a man of ambition. So I show up at this remote house in the hills about 40 minutes outside of the city. Think Airbnb meets Midsummer with less flowers but the same lingering sense of unease. It's twilight. There's incense. People are barefoot. One guy is wearing a tunic and has a snake casually wrapped around his neck. Harper greets me with a hug that lasts too long and leads me inside where about 20 people are sitting in a circle around a small fire pit. The gathering starts with someone named Asha doing a chant in Sanskrit, followed by a round of gratitude sharing. So far, weird but not alarming. I say I'm grateful for Thai food and Harper's smile, and everyone chuckles like I'm a charming fool. Then comes the breathwork journey. We're told to lie down on these woven mats, close our eyes, and breathe in a specific pattern for like 40 minutes. I half expect someone to pass around a bong, but nope, just aggressive nose breathing and tribal drumming. I follow along, and after about 15 minutes, something strange happens. My hands go numb. My body feels like it's floating. I start crying, for no reason. Not like a few tears, I'm talking open-mouth sobbing like I just watched the dog die in Marley and Me on loop. It's cathartic? Terrifying? Both? Afterward, Harper kisses my forehead and tells me my soul is unbinding. I don't know what that means, but I nod like I do. Then the real weirdness begins. A guy named Orion, real name, I checked, stands up and says, "Tonight, we honor the great she." Everyone starts chanting. I assume she is a metaphor, but then someone wheels in this 7-foot-tall statue of a woman made entirely of what looks like recycled metal and bones. People start offering little trinkets, jewelry, feathers, teeth, locks of hair, and placing them at her feet. Orion then says, "The new initiate may approach." And everyone looks at me. I laugh nervously, thinking it's a joke. Harper smiles and nudges me forward. "It's just a blessing," she whispers. So I walk up. Orion takes my hand, cuts my palm, yes, with an actual blade, and presses it to the statue's chest, which is weirdly warm. Then he smears ash on my forehead and says something in a language I don't recognize. People are swaying and humming and I'm standing there bleeding slightly and wondering how far I'll have to go to get laid. They bring me a robe. I put it on because at this point I've committed. Then there's some kind of ceremonial drink, a thick, earthy concoction that tastes like mushroom-flavored sadness. I drink it. Mistake. Within 30 minutes, I'm hallucinating. The statue seems to be breathing. The fire whispers my name. Someone's face melts and reassembles like a Picasso painting. I look over and Harper is floating, or at least hovering, and her eyes are completely black. She leans over and whispers, "Don't fear the merging." Merging? With what? I don't remember the rest of the night in detail. Bits and pieces remain, chanting, some kind of ecstatic dance, someone vomiting into a crystal bowl, Harper drawing a symbol on my chest with what I hope was charcoal. I woke up at dawn in the middle of a salt circle with goat horns on my head and my jeans nowhere to be found. I panicked, found my phone, someone had taken artsy pictures of me mid-ritual and set one as the wallpaper, got dressed in a rush, and drove home like I'd just escaped a horror movie. Later, Harper texted, "Your energy was luminous. She accepts you. Can't wait to go deeper next time." There was no next time. I unmatched, blocked her, and spent the next week researching whether I'd accidentally joined a cult. Jury's still out. I kept expecting someone to show up at my door to awaken my spirit bond or whatever, but thankfully, nothing yet. I still have the robe, though. It's actually kinda soft. TIFU by impersonating my girlfriend's dad on a Zoom call. This happened about a year ago, and I've only recently started telling people about it because the secondhand embarrassment still wakes me up in cold sweats. For context, I, 28M, have been dating my girlfriend Katie, 27F, for almost 4 years. She comes from a very conservative, tight-knit family, very polite, proper, and a bit formal, the kind of family that still sends handwritten thank you cards. I come from a more casual background, and while I've always gotten along with her parents, I tend to keep things light to avoid awkward tension. Katie's dad, Gerald, is a retired Navy officer turned corporate trainer, and he hosts professional development webinars from his home office. Think khakis, golf shirts, and a Bluetooth earpiece at all times. He's got the voice of someone who could calm a mutiny on a submarine. So, one Tuesday afternoon, Katie and I are working from home in her apartment while her parents are traveling. She's on back-to-back meetings for work, and I'm between freelance projects, killing time in her living room. Around noon, she gets a call from her mom asking for a huge favor. Apparently, Gerald forgot he had a training webinar scheduled that day for a corporate client, a full-on, 90-minute virtual session on conflict resolution in the workplace. He left his laptop at their house, which was only about 20 minutes from us. Katie's mom asked if one of us could go over, log into the laptop, start the Zoom session, and read the slides. "Just read what's on the screen," she said. "They don't even see you, it's screen share with voice only." He has a script open next to the slide deck. Katie was swamped, so I offered to do it. It sounded easy enough. I like public speaking, and I figured, how hard could it be to sound vaguely fatherly for an hour and a half? The only rule was, don't deviate from the script. Just read the slides. No improv. I drive over, get inside with the code they give me, and find Gerald set up in his office. Dual monitors, microphone, everything ready to go. I log in, find the Zoom meeting in his calendar, click it, and join. About a dozen people are in the meeting already, business casual types, muted, mostly cameras off. The slides are up, and there's a detailed speaker's script on a Word document to the right. I test the mic, clear my throat, and at exactly 1 p.m., I start. "Good afternoon, everyone. This is Gerald Thompson speaking. Thank you for joining today's seminar on workplace conflict resolution, communication, clarity, and control." Boom. Nailed the intro. I even tried to lower my voice slightly to sound more like Gerald, firm, professional, with a slight hint of your dad telling you he's not angry, just disappointed. It starts off great. I'm reading slide after slide, and the script is basically word for word what I'm supposed to say. Occasionally, I have to switch tabs to demonstrate a chart or reference a bullet point, but it's smooth sailing. I'm actually kind of enjoying it. There's even a little adrenaline rush. About 20 minutes in, though, I start to get cocky. I've always liked to make people laugh, and I start thinking, this script is dry. A little joke here and there would spice it up. So I toss in something light. The slide says, identify the root cause of interpersonal tension. I say, much like identifying the root cause of why your spouse is giving you the silent treatment, was it the laundry, or was it the thing you said 3 weeks ago and promptly forgot? A few chuckles. I see some mics unmute briefly. Encouraging. I keep going, emboldened. Another slide says, use neutral language to avoid escalation. I add, for example, instead of saying you're being ridiculous, try I see we have different perspectives, and mine happens to be correct. A few more laughs. I'm riding high now. I get through the first hour throwing in jokes, light banter, even a fake anecdote about one time I had to mediate an argument between 2 coworkers about stolen yogurt in the break room. It's clearly fake, but it lands well. The trouble starts around the 70-minute mark. Someone unmutes and says, Gerald, could you elaborate a bit on the circle of constructive communication? I don't see that in the slides. I don't see it either. I scroll through. Nope. Not in the script either. I panic. I don't want to break character, so I say, yes, the circle of constructive communication. Great question. It's a concept I like to introduce during these talks. It's about creating a feedback loop where every point of conflict becomes an opportunity for growth. Total improv. I'm pulling this out of thin air, spouting vague corporate speak. Picture a circle, at one point is intention, at another point is perception, and at the third, communication. Conflict often arises when perception and intention are misaligned due to poor communication. The circle helps us visualize that all 3 must stay in balance. Another attendee unmutes. Do you have a visual for that? Unfortunately, not in this deck, I say. But I encourage you to draw your own. That exercise alone is quite enlightening. They all seem satisfied. After the session ends, I close Zoom, pack up, and drive back to Katie's. I feel like a king. I tell her what I did, how I added flair, how I invented a theory, how I probably just changed corporate training forever. She stares at me in horror. You did what? She gets a text. Then a call. It's her dad. From Bermuda. Furious. Apparently, the client loved the session. They asked for the recording. Said Gerald was more charismatic and engaging than usual. But the moment they asked about the circle of constructive communication, Gerald knew something was wrong. He's never heard of it. He has no idea what it means. Katie has to confess. Her dad is mortified. He has to email the client and clarify that he'd been experimenting with a guest facilitator approach to explore new ideas in the field. They buy it, but barely. He also makes Katie and me swear, in writing, that I will never ever impersonate him again, professionally or otherwise. For a while, he wouldn't even look me in the eye at family dinners. It's better now. He's forgiven me. But every Christmas, he gives me a framed circle with intention, perception, communication written on it in cursive. I think it's a joke. I hope it's a joke. Either way, I'll never do a fake corporate Zoom as my girlfriend's dad again. Probably. TIFU by taking my boss's daughter on a date without knowing who she was. This happened a few weeks ago and I'm still reeling from the fallout. For context, I, 27M, work at a mid-sized marketing firm, and I've only been there for about a year. I've managed to stay under the radar, do good work, and slowly make a name for myself. Our CEO, Greg, is this polished, intimidating guy in his 50s who kind of has this quiet power vibe. You don't talk to Greg unless he talks to you first. His office is up on the top floor, we're on the floor below. I've probably said about 15 words to the man total, and most of them were, "Good morning, sir." Anyway, a few weeks ago, I met this woman at a bar downtown. Let's call her Elle. She was smart, funny, had this dry wit I really liked, and we vibed almost immediately. We talked for hours over drinks and appetizers. It was that kind of night where the time just disappears. At the end of the night, we exchanged numbers. I asked her out again and we started casually dating. We hung out a few times over the next couple weeks, museums, dive bars, brunch spots. Nothing too serious, just a growing connection. The only weird part was she was always kind of vague about her job and family. Like, she'd deflect when I asked. I didn't press. It's only been a few dates and I figured maybe she just had weird family drama. Fast forward to last Friday. We had plans to grab dinner after work. She texts me midday and says, "Actually, want to come over and I'll cook for you?" I'm not an idiot, so I said yes. I go over to her place, which is this gorgeous penthouse apartment overlooking the city. I'm stunned. She laughed it off and said she lucked out because her dad did well for himself. I just figured maybe finance or tech startup money or something. Dinner is amazing. We're having wine, laughing, and things are heating up. We're on the couch making out when she suddenly pulls away and says, "Hold that thought, I need to get something." She disappears into her room. A minute later, there's a knock at the door. I freeze. I wasn't expecting anyone and she didn't say anything about company. I figure maybe it's a friend or delivery or something, but then I hear keys in the door. Like someone has a key. That's weird. The door opens and in walks Greg. In his freaking designer trench coat, looking like he just came from closing a billion-dollar merger. He stops dead in the entryway, squints at me, and goes, "Do I know you?" My blood turned to ice. I stammered something like, maybe? I work at, and then it hits me. He looks around, sees my jacket on the chair, the 2 wine glasses, and suddenly his eyes go wide with realization. At that exact moment, Elle comes skipping out of her room holding something, a damn board game, I kid you not, sees him, and freezes. Oh. Dad. Dad. Greg looks at her. Then me. Then her again. Elle. Who is this? She's like, "This is Jason. We've been seeing each other. I didn't know you'd be home." And then silence. Deafening, suffocating silence. I open my mouth to try to salvage something, anything, but Greg just raises a hand like a judge silencing the courtroom and says, "You. Leave. Now." I grabbed my stuff and walked out with my tail between my legs. Didn't even take the elevator, just bolted down the stairs all 7 floors. The weekend was pure anxiety. I didn't hear from Elle. I didn't hear from anyone. I expected to come into work Monday and find my badge deactivated or worse. I was picturing Greg assembling the Avengers of HR to ruin my career. But Monday came and nothing happened. No email. No summons. No cold stare of death from across the office. Elle finally texted me Monday night. "That was not how I wanted you to meet my dad. He's not mad." Well, not that mad. Just give him space. So I waited. And waited. Then Thursday afternoon, I get called into a one-on-one performance review. It's with my direct manager, but as soon as I walk into the meeting room, Greg is there. He doesn't say anything at first. Just watches me sit. Then he goes, "So, Jason." I give a panicked, "Yes, sir." He says, "I understand you've been seeing my daughter." I nod. "Yes, sir." He leans forward. "Tell me. Is this a fling? Or something serious?" I swear I forgot how to breathe for a full 5 seconds. I somehow managed to say, "I like her a lot." I didn't know who she was at first. I wasn't trying to, this isn't about anything else. I just genuinely like her. He stares at me for a long time. Then, unbelievably, he smiles. Like, a real smile. I appreciate the honesty. And frankly, she's stubborn. If I tried to stop her from seeing you, she'd probably move to Argentina just to spite me. I didn't know whether to laugh or nod or cry, so I did all three a little bit. Then he said the craziest thing. "Just one thing," he said. "If you ever hurt her, there will be no performance review. There will be no second meeting. You'll just walk into work one day and your desk will be a plant." I nodded so hard I probably looked like a bobblehead. The meeting ended, and I walked out with the most confusing mix of relief and lingering terror I've ever felt. Since then, Elle and I have kept seeing each other. We've even joked about the great reveal a few times. Greg has kept his distance, but occasionally I'll catch him glancing at me in the break room. Not glaring, just watching. The worst part? The firm is planning a company family mixer next month. Which means I will have to shake this man's hand, probably near a chocolate fountain, while pretending we didn't almost throw hands in his penthouse. So yeah. TIFU by dating my boss's daughter without realizing it. The good news is, I'm not fired. The bad news is, I now have the world's most terrifying potential father-in-law. The moral of the story? Always ask what someone's dad does for a living before making out with them on a stranger's couch. TIFU by accidentally joining a cult thinking it was a startup accelerator. So, this happened over the course of about 3 months, but it culminated in a single, chaotic day that made me question every life choice I've made. For context, I'm a 27-year-old software developer with what I thought were decent instincts. I've worked at a few startups, burned out at 2, and was looking to take the plunge and build something myself. The problem? I had no idea what that something was. So, when I saw an ad for an exclusive entrepreneurial retreat for visionary builders, I was intrigued. They called themselves The Forge. Slick website, testimonials from founders with impressive-sounding names, and this sense of mystique. You had to apply, get interviewed, and then, if selected, live on-site for 8 weeks with other founders while receiving holistic business and self-actualization guidance. I know how that sounds now. But back then? It sounded like Y Combinator meets Burning Man, and I was all in. The campus was in Northern California, up in the hills outside Ukiah. They offered to cover room and board if you got accepted, and hey, free rent in California? I was sold. After a pretty intense interview where they asked me about everything from my childhood fears to what animal I'd be in a business ecosystem, I got the acceptance email with all caps, "You've been forged." Cringy, but I was excited. The place looked like a luxury meditation retreat. Minimalist cabins, communal kitchens, and weird statues everywhere. The other attendees were an odd mix. A crypto guy who claimed to have worked with Vitalik, a woman who sold raw goat milk beauty products, a guy named Star who was building an app to map emotions geographically. First week, normalish. We had workshops on idea generation, pitching, even meditation. I chalked up the mandatory 5 a.m. sun gratitude ceremony to quirky wellness stuff. There were mantras, but they were business-themed. I manifest product market fit and my roadmap is aligned with the universe. Weird, but harmless. Week 2 is when things started to slide. We weren't allowed to use the internet anymore to disconnect from distraction and digital pollution. They confiscated our phones and told us it was part of the process. I panicked a little, but others were like, "This is great for focus." Then the workshops shifted tone. Less about building startups, more about realigning capitalist intention with cosmic resonance. There were lectures on corporate soul retrieval, and one of the facilitators, a guy named Indigo who dressed like a wizard and claimed to have descaled himself from the lizard matrix, held a branding session where he told me my company should be named after the last tree I cried under. Things escalated fast. By week 4, they started calling us initiates. We weren't supposed to speak during meals anymore unless it was in solution-oriented chant. They replaced our food with visionary broth and gave us bracelets made from what they called enlightenment fibers, but what I swear was just wet hemp. I tried to leave. One night, I walked toward the gate at the edge of the property, but 2 people in white robes intercepted me and asked where I was going. I said I needed to go to town. They said town was a distraction vortex and that I was close to eclipsing my doubt chakra. That night, I packed my stuff, planning to sneak out early in the morning. But when I woke up, all my clothes were gone. Just gone. In their place was a white robe and a scroll. The scroll said, "Your past has been recycled. Today you begin as seed." I freaked out. I confronted Indigo, the robe wizard guy, and said I wanted to leave, that this wasn't what I signed up for. He just smiled and said, "Of course you want to leave, your ego is resisting death." Then he invited me to a soul liquidity event that night where, apparently, one of the initiates was going to ascend into the fifth revenue plane. I didn't go. I broke into the admin building where they'd stashed our phones. I found mine locked in a filing cabinet labeled Temptations. I ran out of there like it was on fire, no shoes, no wallet, wearing the white robe and carrying a literal scroll. Managed to hitch a ride to town from a local farmer after about 2 hours of walking. I told him I'd escaped from a cult and he just nodded and said, "Was it the forge?" Like it was a regular Tuesday. Apparently, they've been there for years and rebrand every 6 months. The kicker? When I got back to civilization, I had over 90 unread messages from friends and family. Turns out, I'd been featured in one of their promo videos they'd uploaded without permission. There I was, in slow motion, chanting "I am the founder, and the founder is me," while holding a bowl of broth to the sky. My mom thought I'd joined a doomsday group. My old boss asked if I was okay. An ex texted me just to say LOL. Tried to explain to people it was a misunderstanding. A weird startup retreat gone wrong. But let's just say, when your LinkedIn gets tagged in a video titled "Entrepreneurial Rebirth Through Silence and Soup," it's hard to bounce back. Still trying to get back on track, still flinching whenever I hear the word alignment. And yeah, I deleted my application to that other incubator in Sedona. I'm done with anything that includes the phrase vibrational equity. TIFU about 6 months ago, but the full disaster only recently finished unraveling. I'm a 31-year-old dude from Minnesota, working remotely as a UX designer. Back in September, I decided to take a long solo trip to Japan. I needed a break, wanted to disconnect, and figured rural Japan would be peaceful, beautiful, and, most importantly, cheap. I found a traditional farmhouse on an obscure rental site. It was in a mountain village that had maybe 50 people. The listing was vague, and the pictures were clearly taken with a flip phone, but it was cheap and looked authentic. I booked it for 6 weeks. When I got there, the place looked like a Studio Ghibli film: green misty forests, stone paths, thatched roofs, birdsong, and the whole shebang. The house was rustic but charming. I was greeted by an old woman, mid-80s maybe, named Kaoru, who bowed so deeply I thought she might snap in half. She kept calling me Kami-sama. My Japanese is conversational at best, so I assumed it was some honorific they used for guests. The first weird thing was the food. Kaoru would bring me elaborate meals every day. I'm talking restaurant-level presentations of seasonal vegetables, rice, the fish, and miso, always left outside my door with little handwritten notes in brushstroke kanji I couldn't read. I tried to decline, explain I could cook for myself, but she just shook her head and pressed her hands together like she was praying. Then the villagers started showing up. Not a lot, maybe 5 or 6 at a time, but they'd gather quietly outside the house around dusk. Just sitting or kneeling, staring at the porch. Sometimes they'd leave small bundles, rice, flowers, folded cloth. One guy even left a chicken egg. I assumed it was some kind of local hospitality custom. I was charmed. Thought I was having a real, immersive cultural experience. Now, I was working remotely, so during the day I was mostly on video calls. My coworkers started asking about the place, and I'd show them the view: misty forests, old temples, all very zen. One of them joked that I looked like some kind of monk. So, for fun, I started leaning into it. I found a beige robe in the closet, probably a yukata, but it looked monkish, so I wore it during a team meeting. I even bought prayer beads from a tourist shop in Kyoto on a weekend trip and started using them as a prop. Then one day, I noticed someone had carved a symbol into the tree in front of the house. It was subtle, kind of like a spiral with little wings, and I figured it was a traditional marking or maybe even graffiti. But over the next few days, more of these symbols started appearing. On stones, on the sides of other houses, on wooden plaques outside doorways. Around week 3, Kaoru invited me to a ceremony. I thought I was finally being formally welcomed into the village. She led me into a small temple at the edge of the forest. Inside were maybe 20 villagers, all sitting silently. The smell of incense was so strong it made my eyes water. Then Kaoru began to chant. Others joined in. And then, to my absolute horror, they all bowed deeply toward me. I panicked. Tried to stand, told them they didn't have to do that. Kaoru just smiled, eyes watery, and said in Japanese, "You have returned to us." I didn't know what to do. I just stood there awkwardly while they finished chanting. When I got back to the house, I messaged a friend of mine who teaches Japanese history. I described the spiral wing symbol and the chanting. He asked for a photo. When I sent it, he called me instantly. "Dude," he said, "you've walked into some kind of mountain cult." I laughed. He didn't. Turns out there were small sects in Japan's past that followed what historians call reclusive kami traditions. Basically, they believed their god had once lived among them in human form and would return one day in a body. A foreign body. It was a weird fusion of Shinto and some imported Buddhist elements. Some of these sects were thought to have died out centuries ago. Except, apparently not. My friend told me to leave. Immediately. But I had 6 weeks paid and the cultists seemed harmless, if overly enthusiastic. I stayed. I was stupid. By week 5, I was being brought into people's homes. They'd serve me tea while quietly weeping. One elderly man tried to give me his granddaughter, literally kept motioning between her and me and saying, to continue the sacred line. I noped out of there so fast I nearly rolled down a hill. I tried to explain I was just a tourist, but every time I did, they'd just nod and say the spirit is confused, it is the body that remembers. Then, Kaoru presented me with an old scroll. It had faded ink drawings of a man who looked disturbingly like me, same beard, same stupid robe, even the prayer beads. It was like looking at a medieval cartoon version of myself. I couldn't even blame them at that point. I'd accidentally cosplayed their god into reality. That night, there was a storm. Thunder, wind, the works. I woke up to Kaoru standing silently at the edge of the room. She said, "The mountain is ready. Tomorrow is the crossing." Nope. I packed everything I owned, left a thank you note with as much broken Japanese as I could muster, and hiked down the mountain at 4 a.m. with nothing but my backpack and the world's fastest heartbeat. I took a train back to Tokyo and ghosted the host completely. Never left a review. I didn't even collect my deposit. For months after, I kept thinking someone would show up. That I'd hear a knock on my door and find Kaoru standing there, arms open, whispering "Kami-sama." It never happened. But last week, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a wooden carving of that same spiral wing symbol. And underneath it, in perfect English, * when you are ready to return. * I've moved. Changed my number. Deleted my socials. And every time I hear wind rustling in the trees, I get flashbacks of old women chanting and being offered someone's granddaughter like a melon at a market. So yeah. TIFU by becoming a cult god because I wanted a scenic Zoom background. TIFU by catfishing my own girlfriend. By accident. This happened about 4 months ago, but it's taken me a while to fully recover from the sheer embarrassment and emotional mess I caused. For context, I, 28M, have been with my girlfriend Alyssa, 26F, for a little over 3 years. We lived together in a small apartment in Chicago. She's smart, driven, funny, and way out of my league. If we walk into a restaurant, Waiters assume she's a model and I'm her publicist. So the story starts when Alyssa started acting distant. Not in a major, red flag way, but more like she was preoccupied or holding something back. I'd ask her if she was okay, she'd smile and say she was fine, but her phone was suddenly on Do Not Disturb a lot, and she seemed to be texting someone more than usual. I told myself I trusted her, and I do, but that didn't stop my anxiety from spiraling into full-blown mental gymnastics. So, in what can only be described as an act of total idiocy, I decided to make a fake Instagram account. Not to catfish her, exactly, I wasn't trying to flirt or seduce her. My plan was to create a persona that she'd maybe confide in, or at least interact with, so I could figure out what was on her mind. I know how bad that sounds. I'm aware now that it's the plot of like 7 Netflix thrillers and at least 3 cancelled CW shows. But at the time, it felt like a clever workaround to avoid an awkward confrontation. I made the account under the name Jake Halston 23, filled it with some stock photos of a not too attractive but not hideous guy, and followed a few meme pages to look legit. I even made up a backstory. Jake was a freelance graphic designer living in Seattle who loved indie music and craft beer. I found an old band Alyssa used to love in college and followed them from the account. Then I followed her. A day later, she followed back. Cue the anxiety. I didn't message her right away. I waited, telling myself I wasn't going to go through with it. But then she posted a story, some artsy shot of her coffee with a caption that said mood. I replied from Jake's account with a generic vibes emoji. To my surprise, she replied. She said, haha, been one of those weeks. I told myself it was innocent. People reply to stories all the time. But then we kept chatting. Nothing flirtatious, she was being friendly. I steered the conversation toward music, then design, then work stress. Over a couple of days, she vented a little about her job and how she felt stuck. Then she dropped a bomb. Honestly, it's nice to talk to someone who listens. My boyfriend is sweet, but he's been so distracted lately. I swear I felt my soul leave my body. Distracted? Me? I was literally obsessing over her every move like a weirdo with a whiteboard. Still, I couldn't exactly out myself now. I replied, relationships are hard. Maybe he's going through something too? To which she said, maybe. I just don't know if we're as connected as we used to be. That one stung. I spent the whole night spiraling. I knew this was my cue to stop. But instead, I doubled down. I kept talking to her from the Jake account. Over the next week, we messaged daily. She never crossed a line romantically, but the emotional intimacy? Oh man, it was like watching someone fall for a version of you that you knew was fake. Eventually, she asked if Jake wanted to FaceTime. Panic. I made up a lie about having a cracked camera. She said no worries, but after that, the tone shifted. She got quieter. Slower to respond. I figured she was getting suspicious, or bored. Or both. Then one Friday night, I got home to find her sitting on the couch with her phone in her lap and that we need to talk look on her face. She said, I need to tell you something. Heart pounding. Palms sweating. I was ready to confess. But then she said, I've been talking to someone online. I froze. Like, full body locked up. She explained how it started, how she felt like she couldn't talk to me, how this random guy made her feel seen. She was crying. I was crying. And then, just as I was about to tell her I was Jake, she said, but I blocked him. I realized I didn't know him. And I wanted to fix things with you. Reader, I died. She chose me. The real me. And I was still too chicken to tell her. I hugged her. Told her I was sorry for being distant. We talked for hours that night. She opened up about work stress, feeling like I'd been shutting her out, ironically because I was busy fake talking to her, and I promised to do better. And I have. For real. But I couldn't live with the lie. So a week later, I finally came clean. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just sat there, silently, for a long time. Then she said, "You know what hurts? That I opened up to Jake in a way I wish I could have opened up to you, and it was you all along. That one still hurts." She needed time. Moved out for a bit. We did couples therapy. It was a whole thing. But we made it. Somehow. She's back home now. We're okay, still rebuilding, still working, but okay. The Jake account? Deleted. Burned. Salted the earth. I don't expect forgiveness from the internet. What I did was manipulative, invasive, and beyond stupid. But I learned two things. 1, if you think your partner is hiding something, talk to them. 2, never, ever try to be the person your partner confides in by pretending to be someone else. You'll only find out the worst version of the truth, and you won't like the person who hears it. Anyway. That's how I accidentally catfished my girlfriend and almost lost the best thing that ever happened to me. TIFU by accidentally getting adopted by a cult while trying to impress my Tinder date. This happened last month, and I'm only just beginning to recover from the emotional whiplash. Buckle up, it's a long one. So I matched with this girl on Tinder, let's call her Maya. She was gorgeous, smart, into hiking, philosophy, and, this is important, very into living in the now and spiritual community. That should have been a red flag, but I was too busy trying not to look like a guy who still eats Hot Pockets for dinner. Anyway, after a week of texting, she invites me to this gathering on a Saturday evening. I figure it's a party. She says it's being hosted by her people, and there would be music, food, and a bonfire in the woods about an hour out of the city. I assumed she meant a music fest or maybe a hippie rave. She even offered to pick me up, which I now realize was step 1 of being taken to a second location. We get there and it's not what I expected. Imagine 50 people, all wearing earth-toned robes or loose linen pants, standing in a circle, chanting something that sounded like the lyrics of a Radiohead song translated into Sanskrit. Maya immediately blends in, hugs like 10 people, and introduces me as a new light joining our orbit. I awkwardly say hi, trying to look like I know what's happening. Still thinking this is just a quirky spiritual group, I go along with it. There's vegan food, acoustic guitar, and even some girl giving out kombucha in mason jars like it's sacred wine. Everyone's very touchy. Like a lot of long eye contact, lots of your aura is chaotic today kind of vibes. Then the leader shows up. His name? Not David. Not Michael. No, his name is Flame. Just Flame. Flame is this 50-something dude with silver hair, a beard braided with beads, and a voice like syrup. He starts talking about how the night is a sacred convergence and how the moon aligns with the rebirth of Salas. Everyone's nodding like he's reading them bedtime stories, and I'm just sitting there munching a sweet potato wrap, nodding along because I want Maya to think I'm deep. Then Flame locks eyes with me. "You," he says, smiling like he knows my browser history. "You are untethered. Floating. But not lost." I chuckle, thinking this is just his shtick, like a horoscope with more theatrics. He walks up, places his hands on my shoulders, and tells the crowd, tonight, he joins our circle. Everyone cheers. I laugh nervously. Then Maya takes my hand and whispers, "This is beautiful. Just go with it." Reader, I did not just go with it. I sprinted with it. They gave me a robe. I wore the robe. They painted a sun on my forehead with turmeric and ash. I let them. They taught me a chant about ascending the ego staircase. I chanted. Flame talked for like an hour about how our names are bindings and how we need to release labels to become truth. Then he asked me to share my soul name. I panicked. I didn't have a soul name. So I blurted out the first thing that came to mind, quartz. I don't know why. I don't even like crystals. But it stuck. For the rest of the night, I was Quartz. People kept coming up and hugging me and whispering things like "Welcome home, Quartz," and "Your light hums with frequency." I started to think maybe this was just a weird but harmless commune. Then Flame starts talking about the departure. The vibe shifts. People start crying. One woman starts singing in tongues. I'm sitting there, robe-clad, soul-named, extremely out of my depth. Turns out, the departure wasn't some metaphor. It was literal. Flame announces they're leaving society. Like, tonight. To live off-grid in the desert. For the great realignment. Maya turns to me and says, "Isn't it incredible? You came at the perfect time. It's fate." My stomach drops. My phone has no service. They've collected everyone's devices in a basket to unchain us. Mine's in there, dead. There's a big van being packed with dried goods and dream catchers. People are chanting and loading boxes labeled sustenance and water harvesters. I try to find Maya and tell her I need to leave, that I forgot to feed my cat. She just smiles and says, "Quartz, fear is the shadow of awakening." Flame hears me say I want to go and walks over, calm as a monk on Xanax. He says, there are no exits. Only arrivals. I genuinely start to panic. Then, and I swear this is true, a goat walks into the fire circle. No leash. No explanation. Just a goat. Everyone kneels. Someone says Salas has sent a vessel. I take that as my cue. While everyone's distracted blessing the goat, I make a break for the parking area. No one's guarding the phones. I grab mine and bolt into the woods. No light, no map, just vibes and fear. I hike through brush, ruin my shoes, and finally find a road. After about 40 minutes of walking, I flag down a couple in a Subaru who thankfully don't leave me to get reabsorbed by Salas. I get back home after 3 a.m., covered in dirt, turmeric, and regret. The next day, Maya texts me, "Quartz, I feel your absence. Flame says your shadow self isn't ready to depart. We honor your path." Blocked. Anyway, I'm now banned from 2 co-ops and a vegan bookstore because apparently Flame has a network. My therapist says I'm susceptible to identity crises. My mom says I need to stop dating women with astrology tattoos. TIFU by agreeing to dogsit for my boss and accidentally joining a neighborhood cult. I, 29M, work in digital marketing for a pretty chill startup. My boss, Greg, mid-40s, polo shirt enthusiast, is one of those guys who drinks buttered coffee and talks about intermittent fasting like it's a personality trait. We're not close, but I've been working there long enough that we're on hey, buddy terms, which is fine by me. Last Friday, right before the weekend, Greg popped into my cubicle and said, "Hey, buddy, favor to ask. Could you watch Barkley for the weekend? Our dog sitter bailed, and we've got this wine retreat in Napa. I don't have a dog, but I love them, and I wanted to stay on Greg's good side. Also, Barkley is a 10 out of 10 fluff." I said yes. Saturday morning I show up at Greg's house, a tidy little McMansion in the kind of suburb where lawns are aggressively manicured and everyone owns a Ring doorbell. Greg gives me the rundown: feed Barkley twice, walk him 3 times a day, don't let him on the couch, he will try, and for the love of God, don't forget his 6 p.m. social hour in the neighborhood green space. It's a big deal for him, Greg said. He's very social. The other dog owners will be expecting him. At this point, I should have asked questions. I should have asked any questions. But I was hungover from Friday happy hour and said, "Got it, no problem," like a moron. The first day goes fine. Barkley's a good boy. We go on walks. He poops. I bag it. We nap. We vibe. 6 p.m. rolls around, and I leash him up and head toward the green space, which is basically a glorified field between 2 rows of fancy homes. That's when things got weird. As I approached, I saw about a dozen people already gathered in a loose circle. They weren't just standing there, though. They were all wearing the same kind of navy blue hoodie. It was 75 degrees out. Some of them were holding leashes, others were sitting cross-legged on the grass, all eerily quiet. A tall woman with a clipboard approached me like she'd been waiting. "You must be Barkley's guest," she said. "Guest? Yeah. I'm just watching him for the weekend." She smiled way too wide. "You're welcome to join today's affirmation circle." Before I could respond, Barkley yanked the leash and ran up to greet a golden doodle with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for soldiers returning from war. The woman gently took the leash from me. "He knows his place," she said. Then she handed me a spare hoodie. "Listen. I'm not a confrontational person. I wish I was the kind of guy who could just say, 'No thanks, I'm good,' and walk away. But I panicked. I took the hoodie. We sat in the circle. The woman, I later learned her name was Serenity, which is the most predictable thing I've ever heard, led the group in what I can only describe as a guided meditation for both people and dogs. There was humming. There were chakra alignments. One guy in the back was crying. The dogs were just chilling like this was totally normal. And then came the naming. Each human introduced themselves and then honored their dog with a made-up spiritual title. "I swear to God," someone said, "I am Jeremy, and this is Willow, bringer of stillness." Someone else had a French bulldog named Sir Nimbus, keeper of wind. When it was my turn, I froze. "I'm, Ben. And this is Barkley, herald of companionship?" The group m'd in approval. Serenity looked like she was about to cry tears of joy. I thought that would be the end of it. But no. That was just day one. The next day I figured I'd just skip the 6 p.m. cult circle and blame traffic or food poisoning or a minor earthquake. At 5:45 p.m., there was a knock at Greg's door. It was Serenity. With Barkley's leash in hand. "We didn't see you this morning for sun salutations," she said. "But we forgive." She forgives. Like I was a wayward apostle. I mumbled some excuse, but before I knew it, she was in the house. Barkley barked once, and she actually bowed to him. Bowed. Then she sniffed the air and asked if I'd burned sage in the living room. I had not. It was probably the pizza rolls I microwaved, but I nodded anyway. She left me with a pamphlet titled Walking the Path with Paws. It was stapled. It had a table of contents. It was 23 pages long. I decided enough was enough. On Sunday I took Barkley to a different park altogether and avoided the green space like it was cursed. We had a great time, chased some squirrels, no weird cult vibes. But when I got back to Greg's house, there was a note taped to the door. It said, "We felt your absence in the circle. Barkley was missed. Return to the path." No signature. Just a paw print sticker. At this point, I was fully spiraling. Was I being watched? Did Serenity have access to Greg's Ring camera? Would they report me to Greg for spiritual negligence? Monday morning, Greg returned from Napa. I handed over Barkley, tried to act normal, and asked as casually as I could, "Hey, what's the deal with the dog thing in the green space?" Greg chuckled. "Oh yeah. The poth." "The what now?" "You know. The poth. That group Serenity started. She's harmless. Kinda intense, but the dogs like it. They tried to recruit me once, but I told them I was Episcopalian. That shut it down." I stared at him. "So, you knew?" He laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. "Of course. That's why I always dump Barkley on someone else when we travel. It's like a whole thing. Hey, thanks again, buddy." And then he walked away, whistling, leaving me with the crushing realization that I'd been fed to a dog cult like a sacrificial lamb. I've been getting weekly emails from Serenity ever since. Apparently I'm now on the path, and they're expecting me to co-lead something called The Howl of Awakening next full moon. I can't unsubscribe. I've tried. I told my therapist. She laughed so hard she cried. So yeah. I accidentally joined a dog-worshipping suburban cult, and my boss knew it the whole time. Barkley, if you're reading this, you owe me one. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.